In our veterinary application, we've defined the iSchedule repository that we just saw, and we've stored that inside of the core of the appointment scheduling bounded context. Next, the implementation of iSchedule repository is located inside of the infrastructure part of that bounded context, inside of a project called appointmentscheduling.data. This project is responsible for all of the data access for this particular bounded context.
So remember that Steve and I had made an explicit decision about iSchedule repository only exposing a method for update and a method that will explicitly get a schedule with its appointments for a particular date. So those are the only two methods that we have in here. So the update method, again, this is where we're doing persistence. So we've got some persistence code in here that's related to the object relational mapper we're using, which is Entity Framework. What we're doing here is we're taking the state that we've stored in each of our objects. We have a custom enum called tracking state. So in each of the objects, we're able to set the state of the objects. And then we're transferring that information to Entity Framework and letting Entity Framework be aware of what that object's state is. I also want to point out that updating the schedule aggregate really only means updating the appointments in that aggregate. Notice that we're not doing anything with the state of the schedule entity itself. That's because we don't need to update the schedule in the persistence layer. Its persisted properties, that's the schedule ID and the clinic ID, shouldn't ever really change. If we are creating a new clinic and therefore a new schedule, we wouldn't be doing that within the context of this schedule aggregate and schedule repository. But with the appointments, we're not sure what their state is, and therefore we're iterating through the various appointments, and depending on the state, the tracking state that we applied, we're letting Entity Framework know what that particular appointment state should be. And then when we call Save Changes, Entity Framework will go ahead and run the appropriate insert, update, delete statements for those appointments. The other public method in here is getSchedule for date. GetScheduled has a lot going on in here, and some of this logic that may seem a little convoluted to you is a result of the fact that we don't have explicit navigation properties to some of the information that we want to see about the schedule on our user interface. This is where you're going to see the repository really taking one for the team because we designed the domain the way we really wanted the domain to work. So I'll just walk you quickly through some of what's going on here because this isn't meant to be an Entity Framework lesson. But what's important about this is demonstrating the fact that we designed the domain the way we wanted to without worrying about how we were going to persist this. When we get to the repository, we found, oh yeah, because the navigation properties aren't in our domain, that was an explicit choice, not having them there. But it meant that we needed to do a little extra ninja work with the object relational mapper in the end. So we know the clinic ID and we know the date that we want to filter the schedule on. So all I need to do is query for the schedule ID using that clinic ID and then create a new schedule instance using that schedule ID, the clinic ID, and the date. Once we've got that, then we can go ask Entity Framework to go ahead and query for all of the appointments for that schedule and for the date on which we need those appointments. But there's still one more query that I'm doing, and again, this is because of a lack of navigation properties. On the user interface, we want to be able to display the name of the client, the name of the patient, and the type of the appointment. That information is not in the appointment. The appointment only has the IDs. So I'm actually running another query to pull back a list of strings that will give me that information for each one of the appointments. I'm doing that in the getAppointmentHighlights method. Now, just for the sake of this demo, I've embedded the T-SQL right in here just so that you could see that I'm doing something special to get that information and then pushing it back to my main method. That's something I would normally really put into a stored procedure. But once I get that data back, then we merge that data back together with all the appointments. And then we can return that schedule fully loaded with all of its appointment information to whatever part of the application requested it.